A calm day at the park explodes. A child screams. A homeless man lunges. A black single dad moves like lightning, no rage, just skill pinning danger without throwing a punch. The crowd gasps, then the twist. The attacker is a broken soldier, and the hero chooses mercy over blame. Praise turns to whispers, whispers turn to hate. His own child is targeted at school. Doors close, screens spit venom. But this father won't back down. He rallies parents, veterans, and neighbors to stand up for every kid who's been hurt in silence. Love meets fear. Faith meets fire. And one small town must choose who it wants to be. When the past collides with the present, will this dad's courage heal the wounds or tear everything apart? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The autumn sun painted golden streaks across Riverside Park, where laughter and chatter filled the crisp afternoon air. Marcus Hayes sat on a weathered wooden bench, his keen eyes following his daughter Amaya as she twirled on the playground. Her pink sweater fluttered like butterfly wings as she spun, her braids bouncing with each turn. Marcus smiled, though his heart carried its familiar weight. Being both mother and father to an 8-year-old wasn't easy, but moments like these made every struggle worthwhile. He watched other parents chatting in small groups, pushing strollers, or helping toddlers down slides. Some gave him the usual sideways glances. A tall black man sitting alone at a playground still drew attention, even in their relatively progressive neighborhood. "Higher, Daddy! Watch me go higher!" Amaya called from the swings, pumping her legs with determination. Marcus gave her a thumbs up, pride warming his chest. She'd been so resilient since her mother passed, stronger than any child should need to be. "That's great, baby girl. Just be careful," he called back, his deep voice carrying easily across the playground. The peaceful scene shifted when a man stumbled into view near the playground entrance. His clothes hung in tatters, his gray beard matted and wild. Marcus's military training kicked in immediately the way the man's hands shook, his erratic movements, the confused anger in his eyes. These were signs Marcus knew too well from his time serving overseas and working with veterans since. The man began shouting, his words slurred and desperate. "They're coming! Can't you see them? We have to! Have to!" His bloodshot eyes darted around wildly. Parents began gathering their children, some hurrying away, while others stood frozen, unsure how to react. Marcus rose slowly, his muscles tensing as he assessed the situation. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, remained on the swings near Amaya, her mother too far away to reach her quickly. Everything happened in a blur. The homeless man's face contorted with sudden rage or terror. Marcus couldn't tell which, and he lunged toward the swings. The little girl screamed. Her mother shrieked from across the playground. Amaya jumped off her swing and scrambled backward. Marcus moved without thinking, his body remembering years of training. 3 long strides brought him between the man and the children. He caught the man's wrist mid-grab, redirecting his momentum away from the swings. In one fluid motion, Marcus turned the man's arm behind his back, firm enough to control, gentle enough not to harm. "Easy now, brother," Marcus said softly, his voice steady and calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "You're safe here. No one's coming for you." The man struggled briefly, then began to sob. "They never stop. The shadows never stop." "I know," Marcus soothed, maintaining his hold while speaking just loud enough for the man to hear. "I've seen them too. But you're home now. You're in Riverside Park, and it's 2023. Parents stared in shock, many with phones raised to record the scene. Some whispered among themselves, pointing at how Marcus handled the situation without violence. The little girl's mother rushed forward, scooping up her daughter and backing away with tears streaming down her face. Amaya watched from a safe distance, her eyes wide but not afraid. She'd seen her father do this before talk-down veterans at the support center where he volunteered. She knew her daddy was different from other dads, knew he carried invisible wounds that made him understand broken people. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Marcus kept his hold gentle but secure, continuing to speak in low, soothing tones to the trembling man. "Help is coming, brother. We're going to get you some real help." The man's struggles had ceased entirely now, replaced by quiet weeping. Marcus could feel the familiar tremors of PTSD, the same ones he'd battled in his own darkest moments after returning home. As police cars pulled up to the park entrance, Marcus carefully lowered himself and the man to their knees, maintaining his secure hold, but ensuring they both appeared non-threatening to the approaching officers. "Sir, are you all right?" one of the officers called out, approaching cautiously. "We're okay here," Marcus responded clearly. "This man needs medical attention and a veterans crisis team, if you can call one." The little girl who had been on the swings still clung to her mother nearby, hiccuping with leftover tears. Marcus caught her eye and offered a gentle smile. "Hey there, sweetheart. You're safe now. Everything's going to be okay." The girl's mother stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Thank you. I couldn't reach her in time. I couldn't." She pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to finish. Other parents began approaching as the police took over, securing the homeless man and radioing for medical support. Their whispers carried clearly in the tense aftermath. "Did you see how fast he moved? He must be military. That black father who's always here with his daughter. He could have hurt that man, but he didn't, like a soldier, but so gentle." Marcus stood slowly, his body remembering other moments like this, other times when training and compassion had to work together. He felt Amaya's small hand slip into his, and he squeezed it gently. "You okay, baby girl?" "Yes, Daddy," she answered, looking up at him with those wise eyes that sometimes made his heart ache. "He was scared, wasn't he? Like the people at the center where you help?" Marcus nodded, watching as paramedics approached with a gurney. Sometimes people get lost in their memories, especially soldiers who've seen hard things. They need someone to help them find their way back. Police officers began taking statements from witnesses as the paramedics tended to the homeless man. The little girl's mother approached again, this time more composed. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her daughter half hidden behind her legs. "The way you handled that, you saved my Emily." Marcus shook his head. "No thanks needed, ma'am. Just glad I could help." More parents gathered around, their earlier wariness replaced by admiration and gratitude. Sirens continued to wail in the distance, more police arriving to secure the scene. Marcus felt the familiar weight of eyes on him, but this time they held something different than suspicion. They held respect, wonder, and perhaps understanding. He looked down at Amaya, who hadn't left his side. Her face showed no fear, only pride. In moments like these, she reminded him so much of her mother, that same quiet strength, that same capacity for compassion, even in frightening situations. Officer Rivera approached Marcus with measured steps, his notebook already in hand. The evening light had softened, casting long shadows across the playground, where just minutes ago chaos had erupted. Behind them, the homeless man sat quietly in the back of a patrol car, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on nothing. "Sir, I need to get your statement," Rivera said, his voice steady and professional. "That was some impressive work back there." Marcus straightened his shirt, still slightly disheveled from the incident. "Just did what needed to be done," he replied, his eyes drifting to where Amaya stood nearby, watching everything with those observant eyes of hers. The little girl who had been threatened clung to her mother's leg as they gave their own statement to another officer. Her pink dress was smudged with dirt from where she had fallen, but she appeared physically unharmed. "Could you walk me through what happened?" Rivera asked, pen poised. Marcus described the events in precise, measured terms, the way he'd been watching Amaya on the swings, how he'd noticed the man's erratic movements before anyone else, and how he'd acted on instinct when the threat became clear. "Military training?" Rivera guessed, looking up from his notes. "Yes, sir. 12 years of service." Rivera nodded knowingly. "The way you handled him, that was textbook perfect. Minimal force, maximum control." He lowered his voice. "Between us, the guy's a vet too. Recognized the signs. PTSD, probably untreated." Marcus's chest tightened as he glanced again at the patrol car. The homeless man's vacant stare struck something deep within him, a reminder of darker days, of nights when sleep wouldn't come. The little girl's mother suddenly broke away from the other officer and rushed toward Marcus, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she sobbed, wrapping him in an unexpected hug. "Thank you for saving my Emily." Marcus patted her back awkwardly, unused to such displays of emotion from strangers. "Anyone would have done the same, ma'am." "No," she insisted, stepping back to look at him. "They wouldn't." Everyone else froze. "You acted." Other parents began gathering around, adding their voices to the chorus of gratitude. A father shook his hand vigorously. A grandmother blessed him in Spanish. Someone mentioned calling the local news. As if summoned by the word news, 2 reporters materialized with cameras and notepads, pushing through the small crowd. Camera flashes sparked in the dimming light. "Sir, can we get your name? How did you know what to do? Are you a professional security officer?" The questions came rapid fire, making Marcus wish he could step back into the shadows. But Amaya's presence beside him kept him grounded. She slipped her small hand into his, and he felt her quiet pride. "My name is Marcus Hayes," he said simply. "I'm just a father who saw a child in danger." More photos flashed. The little girl, Emily, had moved closer with her mother, and the reporters eagerly captured the moment. The hero, his daughter, and the family he'd helped, all framed by the playground equipment that had witnessed the drama. For a brief, shining moment, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since his days in uniform, the clean, clear certainty of having done something undeniably good. No complications, no second guessing, just pure service. Officer Rivera finished his report and handed Marcus his card. "You might be needed to testify," he explained. "And listen, if you ever want to consider a career change, the force could use someone with your skills and judgment." As the crowd finally began to disperse and the patrol cars pulled away, Marcus and Amaya started their walk home. The setting sun painted the sky in deep purples and oranges, and a cool breeze rustled the trees along their path. Amaya walked quietly beside him for a while, then asked, "Daddy, why did that man try to hurt Emily?" Marcus squeezed her hand gently, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes people fight battles we can't see." Amaya nodded, holding his hand tightly as they continued their journey home, the evening wrapping around them like a protective blanket. The evening sun cast long shadows through the kitchen window of Marcus and Amaya's modest 2-bedroom apartment. The sizzle of chicken and vegetables in the pan filled the small space with appetizing aromas. Marcus stood at the stove, methodically stirring the food while sneaking glances at his daughter. Amaya sat at their worn kitchen table, her math homework spread before her, pencil tapping thoughtfully against her chin. The television mounted on the wall played quietly in the background until a familiar scene caught Marcus's attention. And in local news today, a dramatic rescue at Riverside Park. The anchor's voice grew louder as Marcus reached for the remote to turn up the volume. Shaky cell phone footage showed him tackling the homeless man, the camera wobbling with the photographer's nervous hands. "Daddy, you're on TV!" Amaya exclaimed, her homework forgotten as she watched the screen with wide eyes. Marcus stirred the vegetables with more force than necessary, uncomfortable with the attention. "Just did what needed to be done, baby girl." The news anchor continued. Former military veteran Marcus Hayes demonstrated exceptional bravery today when he subdued a threatening individual at a local playground, saving numerous children from potential harm. Amaya beamed at her father. "You're a hero, Daddy, just like when you were in the army." Marcus's hands stilled on the wooden spoon. The word hero sat heavy in his chest. He couldn't shake the image of the man's vacant stare, the trembling in his dirty hands. There had been something hauntingly familiar about that lost look. The sharp ring of his cell phone cut through his thoughts. Marcus wiped his hands on a kitchen towel and checked the caller ID. "Detective Wilson." "Mr. Hayes? This is Detective Wilson from the 12th Precinct." "Got a minute?" Marcus lowered the heat under the pan. "Yes, sir. What can I do for you?" "Wanted to update you about the man from the park today." The detective's voice was grave. "His name is James Cooper. 20 years military service, 2 tours in Afghanistan. Been on the streets about 3 years now. Severe PTSD, refused treatment multiple times. Marcus's throat tightened. He glanced at Amaya, still captivated by the news footage, then stepped into the small hallway for privacy. What's going to happen to him? Marcus asked quietly. We're trying to get him into a VA program, but, the detective sighed. Look, I know you're planning to press charges, and nobody would blame you, but I'm not, Marcus interrupted. Not pressing charges. Man needs help, not jail. There was a pause on the line. That's mighty decent of you, Mr. Hayes. I'll note that in the report. After ending the call, Marcus stood in the hallway for a long moment, his forehead pressed against the cool wall. The smell of food beginning to burn snapped him back to the present. Everything okay, Daddy? Amaya asked as he hurried back to the stove. Marcus scraped the slightly charred vegetables onto 2 plates. Remember how we talked about invisible battles this afternoon? Amaya nodded, pushing her homework aside as Marcus set their dinner on the table. About the man in the park? Yes, baby. Marcus sat down, choosing his words carefully. That man, he served in the military, just like I did. Sometimes when soldiers come home, they carry heavy things in their hearts, things that can make them scared or confused. Amaya's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Like the nightmares you used to have? Marcus's chest tightened at her perceptiveness. Yeah, baby, like those nightmares. But this man, he didn't have anyone to help him when things got hard. No one to hold his hand or remind him he was loved, like you did for me. That's so sad, Amaya whispered, her brown eyes filling with tears. Couldn't someone help him? Some people tried, but sometimes it's hard to accept help when you're hurting. Marcus reached across the table to squeeze her small hand. That's why we need to have compassion. Even when people do scary things, we don't know their whole story. What's compassion? It's like love mixed with understanding. It's when you try to feel what someone else is feeling, even if they've done something wrong. Marcus smiled gently. Like when you told me about Jamie at school, how she was mean to you, but then you found out her parents were getting divorced. Remember how that helped you understand why she was acting that way? Amaya nodded slowly. And then I shared my cookie with her at lunch, and now we're friends. That's exactly right. That was compassion. Marcus felt a surge of pride at his daughter's innate kindness. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is try to understand someone else's pain. They finished their dinner, talking about lighter things. Amaya's upcoming science project, the new puppy next door, plans for the weekend. But Marcus's thoughts kept drifting back to James Cooper, the man from the park. Later, after checking Amaya's homework and watching her favorite cartoon, Marcus followed their nighttime routine. He helped her brush her teeth, listened to her prayers, and tucked her into bed with her favorite stuffed elephant. Daddy? Amaya's voice was sleepy as he kissed her forehead. Can we pray for that man from the park? The soldier who's sad? Marcus's eyes burned as he knelt beside her bed. That's a beautiful idea, baby. He clasped his hands together, remembering darker days when the only thing that had kept him going was the small hand that now rested in his. Days when the memories of war had threatened to drown him, when the weight of being a single father had seemed impossible to bear. Dear God, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Please, watch over Mr. Cooper. Help him find his way back to the light, like you helped me. And thank you for giving me this amazing little girl who teaches me something new about love every single day. Amen, Amaya murmured, already drifting off to sleep. Marcus remained kneeling in the dark room, listening to his daughter's steady breathing. He thought about how close he had come to his own breaking point after returning from deployment. If it hadn't been for Amaya, for the responsibility of being her father, the haunted look in James Cooper's eyes could have been his own in another life. The thought humbled him, filling him with both gratitude and grief. The morning sun painted the street in gentle golden hues as Marcus's old sedan pulled up to Riverside Elementary. The brick building stood tall against the clear blue sky, its windows reflecting the early light. Students streamed through the front gates, their backpacks bouncing with each step, their voices creating a cheerful morning chorus. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror at Amaya. She sat quietly in the back seat, her purple backpack clutched tightly against her chest. Something about her posture made his heart squeeze. The way her shoulders hunched forward, how her eyes darted toward the school entrance without the usual sparkle. "Ready for another day, sweetheart?" Marcus kept his voice light, though concern crept into his thoughts. Amaya nodded, but her movements were mechanical as she unbuckled her seatbelt. Marcus stepped out of the car and opened her door, as he did every morning. But today, instead of bouncing out with her usual energy, she lingered in her seat. "Daddy." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "My stomach feels funny." Marcus knelt beside the car door, bringing himself to eye level with his daughter. The morning bustle of parents and children continued around them, but in that moment, his world narrowed to just Amaya's face. "Are you feeling sick?" He pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. "Normal temperature." "No, just." Amaya's eyes fixed on her shoes. "Can't I stay home today?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Amaya loved school, always had. She was the kid who packed her backpack the night before, who reminded him about upcoming class projects, who chatted endlessly about her favorite subjects. "Baby girl, you know education is important." He kept his voice gentle. "What's really going on?" Amaya's lower lip trembled slightly, but she straightened her shoulders, a gesture so like her mother's that it made Marcus's heart ache. "Nothing. You're right, Daddy." She climbed out of the car, adjusted her backpack, and managed a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus watched her walk through the gates, noting how she seemed to make herself smaller as she joined the crowd of students. The day crawled by at the security firm where Marcus worked. He couldn't shake the image of Amaya's hesitation, the subtle signs he now realized he'd been missing. When his shift ended, he drove to pick her up, arriving early to watch her emerge from the building. That evening, Marcus prepared Amaya's favorite dinner, mac and cheese with little bits of hot dog cut up in it, just the way she liked. They sat at their small kitchen table, the overhead light casting a warm glow over their faces. He noticed how Amaya pushed the food around her plate more than eating it. "Remember how we always say we can talk about anything?" Marcus set down his fork. "No matter what it is?" Amaya nodded, still staring at her plate. "Something's bothering you, baby girl. I can see it hurting you, and that hurts my heart too." The words seemed to break something loose inside her. Tears welled up in Amaya's eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. "They say mean things, Daddy. Every day now." Marcus's hands clenched under the table, but he kept his voice steady. "Who says mean things?" "Some of the kids in my class," Amaya's voice quivered. They call me names. Bad names about my skin. They say I don't belong there, that I'm not smart enough to be in the advanced reading group." Each word felt like a knife in Marcus's chest. His beautiful, brilliant daughter, who read 3 grades above her level, who wrote stories that made her teachers beam with pride, sat before him, crushed by the weight of other children's cruelty. "Yesterday," Amaya continued, the words tumbling out now, "Jenny told everyone not to sit with me at lunch because," her voice broke, "because I'm different." Marcus moved his chair closer, gathering his daughter into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, her small body shaking with sobs. He held her tight, rocking slightly, the way he used to when she was smaller. "Listen to me, Amaya Hayes." He gently tilted her face up to meet his gaze. "You are beautiful. You are brilliant. You are exactly who God made you to be, and that is perfect. But why do they hate me?" The question was barely audible. "They don't hate you, baby. They're speaking from ignorance and fear. That doesn't make it right. It's wrong, terribly wrong. But their words say nothing about who you are, and everything about who they are." Marcus wiped her tears with his thumb. "I promise you, I'm going to make this right. We're going to face this together, okay? Just like we do everything else." Amaya nodded, her breathing steadying slightly. "Like soldiers?" "Like soldiers," he agreed, managing a smile. "Brave and strong, but also kind. Because that's who we are." They finished dinner quietly, Marcus making sure Amaya ate at least half her meal. He helped her with homework, read her favorite bedtime story, and tucked her in with extra hugs and kisses. Only when he was certain she was asleep did he allow himself to retreat to his own room. The digital clock on his nightstand read 11:47 p.m., but sleep felt impossible. Marcus lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. Anger churned in his stomach, at the children who hurt his daughter, at their parents who taught them such hatred, at a world that still forced his 8-year-old to face these battles. But beneath the anger lay something worse: helplessness. He could protect Amaya from physical threats, like he had in the park. But how could he shield her from words, from attitudes, from the subtle cruelties that would shape her view of herself and the world? Marcus turned onto his side, then his back again, unable to find comfort. The ceiling offered no answers, just shadows and silence. His daughter's tears echoed in his memory, mixing with his own childhood experiences, memories he'd hoped she would never have to share. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the school's multipurpose room, casting a harsh glow on the scattered groups of parents settling into metal folding chairs. Marcus adjusted his tie, the same one he'd worn during his military service, and took a deep breath. The room smelled of floor cleaner and coffee from the small refreshment table in the corner. Principal Davidson stood at the podium, her silver-rimmed glasses catching the light as she went through the usual announcements. Marcus sat straight-backed in his chair, hands folded in his lap, waiting for the open discussion portion of the meeting. Around him, other parents chatted in hushed tones, some sneaking glances his way, his military posture and pressed shirt making him stand out among the casual afternoon crowd. "And now," Principal Davidson said, "we'll open the floor for parent concerns and suggestions." Marcus raised his hand, his movement deliberate and controlled. The principal nodded, and he stood, feeling every eye in the room turn toward him. "Thank you, Principal Davidson," he said, his voice carrying the same calm authority he'd used to command troops. "I'd like to address the ongoing issue of bullying in our school, particularly incidents involving racial prejudice." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. A woman in the front row suddenly became very interested in her phone. Two fathers near the window exchanged looks, their faces a mix of dismissal and annoyance. "My daughter, Amaya," Marcus continued, "along with other students, has been subjected to racist taunts and harassment. I believe we need stronger policies and immediate action to address this." Mrs. Peterson, a regular at PTA meetings, waved her hand dismissively. "Kids will be kids," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, but her eyes hard. "We can't coddle them forever. They need to learn to handle these things themselves." Several parents nodded in agreement. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but kept his voice steady. "With all due respect, Mrs. Peterson, teaching hatred isn't children being children. It's learned behavior that we, as adults, have a responsibility to correct." A man in a business suit, Marcus recognized him as Tommy Wilson's father, cleared his throat. "We already have anti-bullying policies in place. Maybe some kids are just too sensitive these days." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, but years of military discipline kept his expression neutral. He noticed Miss Roberts, Amaya's English teacher, nodding slightly in support of his words, though she remained silent. Principal Davidson stepped in, her voice diplomatic. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes, for bringing this to our attention. We'll certainly take these concerns under advisement." Marcus recognized the polite dismissal but wasn't finished. "I'd like to volunteer," he said, standing his ground. "I can help supervise after-school activities, work with the students directly. Sometimes having more adult presence can make a difference." The principal looked surprised but pleased. "That's a generous offer, Mr. Hayes. We can certainly use the help with our after-school program." A few parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mrs. Peterson whispered something to the woman next to her, both glancing at Marcus with poorly concealed skepticism. But Miss Roberts smiled warmly, raising her hand. "I think that's an excellent idea," she said. "Mr. Hayes has already shown his character with his actions at the park. We could use more parent involvement like this." After the meeting, as parents filed out, Marcus noticed how they parted around him like water around a rock, few making eye contact. Miss Roberts approached him, speaking quietly. "Thank you for speaking up," she said, glancing around to ensure no one was within earshot. "Some of us see what's happening, but change comes slowly here. Having someone like you involved could make a real difference." Marcus nodded, grateful for the small alliance. "When can I start?" "Tomorrow after school, if you're available. We have homework club from 3:30 to 5:00. As Marcus walked to his car, he heard snippets of conversation from a group of parents near the school entrance. "Probably just wants attention after that park incident. Making everything about race these days. Who does he think he is, coming in here trying to change things?" The words followed him across the parking lot, but he held his head high, remembering the way Amaya's face had lit up when he'd told her he'd be volunteering at her school. The drive home was quiet, with Amaya dozing in the back seat, her backpack clutched to her chest like a shield. Street lights swept across her peaceful face as Marcus drove, their gentle rhythm matching the wipers brushing away a light evening drizzle. Looking at her in the rearview mirror, Marcus felt the weight of the day pressing down on him. The dismissive looks, the whispered comments, the thinly veiled hostility. None of it mattered as much as the little girl sleeping behind him. "I won't let this break her," he whispered to himself, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. His words disappeared into the quiet car, mixed with the soft sound of Amaya's breathing and the steady rhythm of tires on wet pavement. The afternoon sun streamed through the high windows of the school gymnasium, creating long rectangles of light across the polished wooden floor. Marcus stood at the center court line, his athletic shoes squeaking as he demonstrated the proper stance for a defensive drill. 20 kids formed 2 lines in front of him, their eyes fixed on his every move. "Remember," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the space, "it's not about being the fastest or strongest. It's about working together and watching out for each other." He gestured to a small boy at the front of the line who had been hesitating. "Come on up, Tyler. You've got this." Tyler shuffled forward, his shoulders hunched. Marcus knelt down to his level, speaking softly so only the boy could hear. "You know what makes a real champion? It's not the medals or trophies. It's getting back up when things are tough." The boy's posture straightened slightly, and a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. From her spot on the bleachers, Amaya watched with unmistakable pride. Her math homework lay forgotten on her lap as she observed her father working with her classmates. A few other kids sat near her, whispering and pointing whenever Marcus demonstrated a particularly impressive move. "Your dad's really cool," whispered Sarah, a girl who had never spoken to Amaya before. "He was in the army, right?" Amaya nodded, her chest swelling with pride. "He was a sergeant," she said, pronouncing the word carefully like she'd practiced. As Marcus guided the children through partner exercises, more parents began trickling in early for pickup. Instead of waiting outside as usual, they lingered by the gym doors, watching with interest. Marcus noticed, but kept his focus on the kids, helping them perfect their movements and praising their teamwork. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose son Miguel had been struggling with confidence, approached the bleachers. "I haven't seen Miguel this excited about school in months," she told Amaya with a warm smile. "Your father has a gift." A woman with a press badge and a notebook had slipped in quietly, leaning against the wall near the water fountains. She scribbled notes as she observed, her eyes tracking Marcus's interactions with the children. The journalist, Sandra Chen from the local paper, had heard about the brewing controversy over bullying at the school. But what she saw here was something different, something hopeful. "All right, everyone partner up for the final drill," Marcus called out. The kids scrambled to find partners, and Marcus noticed something that made his heart swell. Tyler, who usually stood alone, was quickly paired with Miguel. The 2 boys who had once been too shy to participate were now working together without hesitation. "Remember," Marcus demonstrated the movement, "it's like a dance. You move, they move. You step, they step. Always watching out for each other." The children mirrored his actions, their faces screwed up in concentration. Parents were now openly gathering around the edges of the gym, some taking photos with their phones. Marcus caught glimpses of approving nods and encouraging smiles. Even Mr. Thompson, who had been one of the most skeptical parents at the PTA meeting, was watching with interest. Sandra Chen pushed off from the wall and made her way over to where Amaya Saturday. "Hi there," she said softly, showing her press badge. "Would it be okay if I asked you a few questions about your dad?" Amaya looked to Marcus for permission. He gave a subtle nod while spotting a student's form. "He's teaching us more than just sports," Amaya told the journalist proudly. "He says we're learning life lessons." As the session wound down, Marcus gathered the kids in a circle. "Great work today, everyone. Remember what we talked about. Strength isn't just in your muscles, it's in here." He tapped his chest. "It's about having the courage to help others, to stand up for what's right, and to never give up." The children broke into spontaneous applause, their faces glowing with excitement and newfound confidence. Parents joined in, creating a warm wave of support that filled the gymnasium. Marcus felt a familiar sting in his eyes, but maintained his composure. As the gym cleared out, Sandra Chen approached Marcus. "Mr. Hayes, I'd love to talk with you about what you're doing here. It seems like you're building something special." Marcus wiped his brow with a small towel. "I'm just trying to make a difference, one kid at a time." "That's exactly what makes it newsworthy," Sandra replied, her pen poised over her notebook. "Would you be willing to share your story, both as a veteran and as a father working to create positive change?" Marcus glanced at Amaya, who was packing up her homework, with an enormous grin on her face. "Yes," he said finally. "If it helps other parents and kids, I'm willing to talk." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as Marcus and Amaya left the school grounds. Amaya skipped alongside him, her backpack bouncing with each step. "Did you see Tyler and Miguel working together, Dad? And Sarah actually talked to me today." Marcus smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. The weight that had been pressing on his shoulders since learning about Amaya's bullying seemed to lift slightly with each skip of her feet. "You were amazing, Dad," Amaya continued, grabbing his hand and swinging it. "Everyone thinks so. Even Mrs. Thompson said you should coach the basketball team." Marcus chuckled, squeezing her small hand. "One step at a time, sweetie. One step at a time." They walked past the park where everything had started just a week ago. The playground equipment gleamed in the golden light, and the sound of children playing filled the air. But now, instead of tension and worry, Marcus felt something different: hope. Amaya let go of his hand to twirl in front of him, her braids swinging through the air. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked, walking backward so she could face him. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of joy that made everything worth it. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window as Marcus sipped his coffee, staring at the newspaper spread across their small breakfast table. His own face looked back at him from the front page of the local section, a candid shot taken while he was teaching kids basketball in the school gym. The headline read, "Veteran Father Inspires School to Confront Bullying." "Daddy, you're famous," Amaya exclaimed, milk from her cereal dribbling down her chin as she pointed at the photo. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Marcus handed her a napkin, chuckling. "Not famous, sweetheart, just trying to make things better." The article detailed his military service, the incident at the park with the homeless veteran, and his current efforts to combat bullying at Amaya's school. The journalist had done a thorough job, even including quotes from some of the kids he'd been working with in the gym. "Mr. Hayes teaches us that being strong doesn't mean being mean," Amaya read slowly from the paper, her finger tracing under each word. "He shows us how to stand up for ourselves and others." She beamed at her father. "That's what Tommy from my class said about you." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Come on, baby girl, time for school." As they walked the familiar route to school, Marcus noticed more eyes on them than usual. A woman coming out of the corner store waved enthusiastically. "Mr. Hayes," she called out, "I read about you this morning. Thank you for what you're doing for our kids." Before Marcus could respond, an elderly man walking his dog stopped too. "Finally, someone talking sense about discipline and respect," he said, nodding approvingly. Amaya squeezed her father's hand, practically bouncing with each step, but not everyone's reaction was positive. As they passed the coffee shop, Marcus overheard two men in business suits muttering, "Playing hero again. one said, just loud enough to be heard. As if we need more trouble. Maker's stirring things up. Marcus felt Amaya's hand tighten in his. He squeezed back gently, keeping his head high and his pace steady. He'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting, especially not in front of his daughter. At the school gates, several parents approached them. A mother with kind eyes touched Marcus's arm. "My son came home yesterday talking about your basketball drills. He hasn't been this excited about school in months." "That means a lot, thank you," Marcus replied, watching Amaya's face light up at the praise. The morning crowd at school buzzed with excitement. Kids pointed at Marcus, whispering and grinning. Some of the older students even high-fived him as they passed. Principal Roberts emerged from the building, newspaper in hand. "Quite the article, Mr. Hayes," she said, her expression careful. "We're getting calls from other schools asking about your volunteer program." Marcus nodded respectfully. "I just want to help, ma'am. These kids deserve to feel safe here." Throughout the day, Marcus's phone kept buzzing with messages from old military buddies who'd seen the article online. Even his supervisor at work stopped by his desk to congratulate him. "Never knew we had a local hero in accounting," his boss said with a wink. By the time Marcus picked up Amaya from school, the article had been shared hundreds of times on social media. As they walked home, a local TV news van drove by slowly, but Marcus quickened their pace. He wasn't doing this for attention. "Can we get ice cream, Daddy?" Amaya asked as they approached their apartment building. "To celebrate your newspaper story?" Marcus looked down at his daughter's hopeful face. "You know what? That's a great idea." They picked up 2 ice cream cones from the corner store, chocolate for Amaya, vanilla for Marcus, and headed up to their small balcony. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as they settled into their chairs. "Daddy," Amaya said between licks of her ice cream, "Jenny told me today that her big brother stopped picking on her because of what you said about being strong on the inside." Marcus watched a drop of ice cream roll down his cone. "Is that right?" "Uh-huh. And Miguel said his mom is going to come to the next PTA meeting because of your picture in the paper." Amaya giggled as some ice cream dripped onto her chin. Marcus handed her a napkin, smiling. "You've got a little something there, baby girl." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying their treats and watching the sky change colors. A cool breeze rustled through the potted plants Amaya had helped him arrange on the balcony last spring. "You know what's funny, Daddy?" Amaya said, finishing the last bite of her cone. "What's that? Remember when you told me sometimes people fight battles we can't see? Like that man in the park?" Marcus nodded, touched that she remembered. "Well, now you're helping people see the battles. Like mine, and Jenny's, and Miguel's." She looked at him with those wise eyes that sometimes made him forget she was only 8. "That's what the newspaper story really means, right?" Marcus laughed, reaching over to wipe a smudge of chocolate from her cheek. "When did you get so smart?" Amaya giggled, the sound mixing with the distant city noises and the chirping of early evening birds. The last rays of sunlight caught her face, making her eyes sparkle with joy and mischief. "I get it from you, Daddy," she said, then burst into another fit of laughter when he pretended to look shocked. As the sun dipped below the horizon, father and daughter sat together, sharing stories and dreams, their laughter floating out over the city like a promise of better days to come. Marcus stood in the empty school auditorium, his hands clasped behind his back as he paced the stage. The morning sun streamed through high windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. In just 30 minutes, these seats would be filled with students, teachers, and parents. His throat felt dry. "You've got this, Daddy," Amaya said from the front row, swinging her legs. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one with tiny daisies that always made her smile. Marcus paused his pacing and managed a small smile. "I sure hope so, baby girl." He tugged at his tie, the same blue one he'd worn to his military commendation ceremony years ago. It felt tighter now, like it was choking him. Principal Watson appeared at the side door, her heels clicking against the floor. "The students will start arriving soon, Mr. Hayes. How are you feeling?" "Like I'm back in basic training," Marcus admitted, earning a laugh from both the principal and Amaya. "You'll do wonderfully," Principal Watson assured him. "Just speak from your heart, like we discussed." Students began filtering in, their chatter echoing off the high ceiling. Marcus watched as they filled the rows, grade by grade. Some pointed at him, whispering behind cupped hands. He recognized a few faces from his volunteer work in the gym. They waved enthusiastically. Amaya gave him a thumbs up before joining her classmates in the third row. She sat straight-backed, hands folded in her lap, every bit the soldier's daughter. Principal Watson approached the podium, tapping the microphone. The feedback made everyone wince. Good morning, students. Today we have a very special guest speaker. Many of you already know Mr. Hayes from his volunteer work in our gym program. He's also the father of our own Amaya Hayes, and a decorated military veteran. Please give him your full attention. Marcus took a deep breath and walked to the podium. The spotlight felt hot on his face, but he'd faced worse, much worse. Thank you, Principal Watson. His voice came out steady, surprising him. You know, when I was first asked to speak here, I wasn't sure what to say. Should I talk about being a soldier, a single father, about the day at the park that made the news? He paused, scanning the sea of young faces. But then I realized what connects all those things: respect. Respect for others, and respect for yourself. The auditorium grew quieter. Even the usual fidgeters seemed to still. In the military, I learned that respect isn't just about following orders. It's about protecting those who need protection. Standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. He glanced at Amaya, who beamed back at him. But the hardest battles I've fought weren't overseas. They were right here at home. Marcus stepped away from the podium, walking slowly across the stage. After I came home, I struggled. The memories of war followed me everywhere. Some nights, I couldn't sleep. Some days I couldn't smile. But I had something many veterans don't. I had my daughter. His voice softened. Amaya taught me that being strong doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means asking for help. Sometimes it means showing kindness to someone who doesn't deserve it. And sometimes it means standing tall when others try to tear you down. Students leaned forward in their seats. Teachers dabbed at their eyes. Marcus continued, his words flowing easier now. When I helped that little girl in the park, people called me a hero. But you know what? The real hero was the police officer who treated that troubled veteran with compassion. The real heroes are the teachers who work every day to make this school better. The real heroes are kids like you, who choose kindness over cruelty, who stand up for classmates being bullied, who respect differences instead of mocking them. He looked directly at some of the students he knew had bullied Amaya, but there was no anger in his gaze, only understanding. We all fight battles others can't see. The student who seems different, they might be struggling at home. The kid who acts tough, they might be scared inside. The person who looks like they don't belong, they belong exactly where they are. Marcus returned to the podium, standing straighter now. My faith taught me that every person has value. My military service taught me that unity is stronger than division. And my daughter, his voice caught slightly, my daughter teaches me every day that love is more powerful than fear. The auditorium was absolutely silent. Even the youngest students sat motionless, captivated. So when you leave here today, remember this. You have the power to be someone's hero, not by fighting, but by understanding. Not by tearing down, but by building up. Not by excluding, but by welcoming. That's what real strength looks like. Marcus gripped the podium's edges. Thank you for letting me share my story. But more importantly, thank you for being part of a new story we're writing together, one of respect, compassion, and hope. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one student stood, clapping. Another followed. Soon, the entire auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Students rose to their feet, their faces bright with emotion and understanding. Amaya jumped up and down, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clapped harder than anyone. Principal Watson wiped her eyes before joining the standing ovation. Marcus stood at the podium, overwhelmed by the response. His chest swelled with a feeling he hadn't experienced since his proudest military moments, the feeling of making a real difference. But this was different, somehow sweeter. This wasn't about combat or courage under fire. This was about touching hearts and changing minds. As the applause continued to roll through the auditorium like waves, Marcus finally understood he wasn't just Amaya's hero anymore. He wasn't just the man who saved a little girl in the park. He was becoming something more, a bridge between different worlds, a voice for those who needed to be heard, a father figure to more than just his own daughter. For the first time in years, Marcus Hayes felt truly, completely fulfilled. The warm glow of their small kitchen light cast a cozy atmosphere as Marcus and Amaya sat at their dinner table, pasta plates pushed aside. His laptop displayed the recorded assembly speech from earlier that day. Marcus watched himself on screen, standing tall at the podium, his voice steady and clear. "Look how many people are sharing it, Daddy." Amaya pointed at the view counter, which kept climbing. She leaned forward in her chair, practically bouncing with excitement. Marcus smiled, watching his daughter's joy more than the screen. "Pretty amazing, isn't it? Can we read the comments?" Amaya asked, reaching for the touchpad. Marcus hesitated but nodded. The first few comments made his chest swell with pride. "What an inspiring father and veteran. We need more role models like this in our schools. Thank you for your service and for speaking up." Amaya beamed at each positive message, but then her smile faltered. Marcus noticed her expression change and glanced at the screen. His heart sank as he read the newer comments. "Playing the victim again. Just another troublemaker stirring things up. Who does he think he is?" Marcus quickly closed the laptop, but not before Amaya had seen them. Her lower lip trembled. "Why are they so mean, Daddy?" He pulled her into a tight hug. "Some people are scared of change, baby, and scared people sometimes say hurtful things." The next few days passed in a blur of mixed reactions. In the school hallways, some teachers and parents smiled warmly, while others avoided eye contact. Marcus tried to focus on the positive impact he was making, but the weight of the negative comments grew heavier. Then came the PTA meeting. The school library was packed with parents, sitting in tight rows of plastic chairs. Marcus sat near the back with Amaya doing homework beside him, half listening to discussions about fundraisers and curriculum changes. When the topic turned to bullying policies, he straightened in his chair. A man in a press suit stood up, his face flushed. "I've got something to say about all this recent attention." He turned to face Marcus directly. "Some of us are tired of people like you using the race card to get special treatment." The room fell silent. Amaya's pencil stopped moving. "My kids have been here for years," the man continued, his voice rising. "We never had these problems until you started making speeches and getting newspaper coverage. You're just looking for handouts and attention." Marcus felt his daughter trembling beside him. The room seemed to spin as other parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some nodded in agreement with the man, while others stared at their hands. Marcus started to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. The military training that had helped him face combat couldn't prepare him for this kind of attack, not with his daughter watching, not in this place that was supposed to be safe. Tears welled up in Amaya's eyes. Marcus gathered their things quickly, his movements mechanical and stiff. As they walked out, he heard whispers and a few weak protests, but no one stood up to defend them. The drive home was silent, except for Amaya's quiet sniffles. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white, fighting back his own emotions. Every streetlight they passed illuminated his daughter's tear-stained face in the rearview mirror, breaking his heart again and again. At home, he tucked Amaya into bed early, reading her favorite story until she fell into an uneasy sleep. Then he retreated to the kitchen, slumping into a chair at the table. His phone kept lighting up with notifications. In the darkness, he scrolled through message after message. "Maybe you should stick to your own neighborhood. Nobody wants to hear your complaints. You're making everything worse." Mixed among them were supportive messages from a few parents and teachers, but they felt distant and hollow now. The cruel words seemed to jump off the screen, each one a fresh wound. Marcus stared at his reflection in the black kitchen window. The same face that had looked so confident on stage now seemed tired and uncertain. The phone's harsh glow highlighted the worry lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. With a heavy sigh, he finally pressed the power button, plunging the kitchen into darkness. The silence felt both welcome and suffocating. He sat there, a decorated veteran and devoted father, feeling more defeated than he ever had on any battlefield. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting thin stripes of light across the untouched coffee in Marcus's mug. He sat motionless at the table, staring at his phone. 3 missed calls from the school's volunteer coordinator, 2 from concerned parents, 1 from the journalist who'd written the article about him. He couldn't bring himself to return any of them. "Daddy?" Amaya's voice came from the hallway. "Are you taking me to school today?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Mrs. Thompson from next door is giving you a ride, remember? But you always take me." The hurt in her voice made his chest tighten. "I'm just not feeling well today, baby." It wasn't exactly a lie. His head throbbed, and his shoulders carried a familiar tension he hadn't felt since his darkest days after returning from combat. The past few days had become a blur of avoiding phone calls, making excuses, and lying awake at night. After Amaya left, Marcus wandered their small apartment like a ghost. The walls seemed to close in, decorated with photos of happier times. Amaya's first day of school, their camping trip last summer, his military graduation. His eyes lingered on a group photo with his old unit. Young faces smiled back at him, some of them now gone forever. The memories hit him like physical blows. Sergeant Rodriguez's laugh during card games. Private Chen's terrible jokes. The explosion that took them both. The weight of responsibility crushed down on his shoulders, just like it had then, just like it did now with Amaya. He collapsed onto the couch, his breath coming in short gasps. The room spun slightly. On the coffee table, Amaya had left one of her drawings, stick figures of them holding hands, surrounded by hearts. "My hero" was written in crooked letters across the top. "Some hero," he muttered. The days blurred together. Marcus called in sick to work. He stopped answering the door. When Amaya came home from school, he tried to smile, to help with homework, to be present, but she noticed the difference. The spark was gone from his eyes. She started leaving little notes around the apartment. "I love you, Daddy. You're the best dad ever. Remember when you saved that girl? You're my superhero." Each note pierced his heart. What kind of hero let his daughter face racism and bullying? What kind of hero couldn't even face a PTA meeting? The faces of his fallen comrades haunted his dreams. In them, he was always too slow, too weak, too late to save them. Now those dreams mixed with new ones. Amaya crying at school, Amaya being taunted, Amaya losing her smile because of his failed attempts to change things. One morning he found himself staring at his old military medals, tucked away in a box in his closet. Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Tokens of bravery that felt hollow now. His hands shook as he touched them, remembering the cost of each one. The weight of lives lost. The weight of responsibility. "What am I doing to her?" he whispered to the empty room. Was his fight for change just making things worse for Amaya? Every step forward seemed to bring 2 steps back, more hatred, more pain for his little girl. That evening, Marcus sat in his armchair, lost in thought as the TV played unwatched. He barely registered Amaya's quiet footsteps approaching until she was right beside him. Without a word, she climbed onto his lap, just like she used to when she was smaller. Her small hands reached up to touch his cheek, wiping away tears he hadn't realized were falling. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice soft but strong, "you told me a soldier never quits, even when the battle feels too big." The simple truth of her words broke something open inside him. Marcus pulled her close, his tears falling freely now. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence, this precious girl who somehow had the wisdom to remind him of his own strength. They sat there in the growing darkness, father and daughter, warrior and angel, each holding the other up. And for the first time in days, Marcus felt something stir in his chest, not quite hope yet, but the ember of it, kept alive by the love of his little girl. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, but Marcus couldn't find the energy to get out of bed. His phone buzzed again, probably another message from the school about his volunteer schedule. He rolled over, pulling the covers higher. "Daddy?" Amaya's soft voice came from his doorway. "We're going to be late." Marcus forced himself to sit up, rubbing his face. Sorry, baby. Give me 5 minutes. The drive to school was quiet. Marcus noticed Amaya stealing worried glances at him. He tried to smile, but it felt hollow. At the drop-off, he barely managed to wave before driving away. Back home, Marcus stared at his phone. 3 missed calls from the school coordinator. 2 messages about the reading program he'd been helping with. He switched it off and sank into his armchair, the one that still had a spring poking through the side. The silence of the apartment pressed in around him. Without Amaya's chatter or the busy routine of volunteering, old memories crept back. The bang of distant construction became gunfire. The whoosh of passing cars transformed into desert winds. Afghanistan, 2008. His unit had been tasked with protecting a small village. They'd built trust with the locals, especially the children who would run to greet them. Then came the attack. He'd failed to spot the warning signs. 2 of his men didn't make it home. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, but the faces were there. Young Johnson with his goofy laugh, Rivera, who'd just become a father. Their dog tags had felt so heavy in his hands. The days blurred together. He went through the motions, getting Amaya to school, making meals, helping with homework. But the spark was gone. When the phone rang, he let it go to voicemail. When emails came about school meetings, he deleted them. Amaya tried everything to lift his spirits. She drew him pictures of superheroes that looked like him. She asked him to tell her stories about his army adventures, something she knew usually made him smile. But the words stuck in his throat. "Want to play chess, Daddy?" she asked one evening, holding up the worn board they'd spent countless hours over. "I've been practicing at school." "Not tonight, sweetheart," he mumbled, staring at the TV without really seeing it. Later that night, he overheard her on the phone with her aunt. "I'm worried about Daddy," she whispered. "He's not smiling anymore." The guilt ate at him. Here he was, supposed to be fighting for his daughter, but instead he was dragging her into. The morning sun painted golden stripes across their usual booth at Sally's Diner. Marcus watched as Amaya meticulously spread strawberry jam on her toast, her small face scrunched in concentration. The familiar clink of coffee cups and murmur of conversation filled the air around them. "You know what, sweetheart?" Marcus said, setting down his coffee mug. "You were right last night. A soldier never quits." Amaya looked up, a dot of jam on her chin. "Really? You're not giving up?" "No way." Marcus reached across the table with a napkin, gently wiping the jam away. "Your old dad just needed a reminder of who he island." Sally, the diner's owner, topped off Marcus's coffee. Her gray curls bounced as she nodded approvingly. "Good to see you two this morning. Missed your faces lately." Marcus straightened in his seat. "Sally, you know everyone in town. Who runs that veteran support group that meets here on Thursdays?" "That'd be Jim Cooper," Sally replied, pulling out her order pad. "Want me to give him your number?" "Please." Marcus turned back to Amaya. "We're going to need help for what comes next." Over the next hour, Marcus pulled out his phone and started making calls. He began with Pastor Michael from their church, then reached out to Mrs. Rodriguez, who ran the local community center. Each call added another piece to his growing plan. By the time they left the diner, Marcus had a list of names and a clear vision. Amaya skipped alongside him to the car, her energy contagious. "What are we going to do, Daddy?" "We're going to march," Marcus explained, helping her buckle in. "A peaceful march to show everyone that bullying hurts all of us, not just some of us." That afternoon, Marcus met Jim Cooper at the Veterans Center. The older man's handshake was firm, his eyes sharp with understanding. "Heard what happened at the school," Jim said. "Some folks don't like change, but that doesn't mean we stop pushing for it." They spent hours planning. Other veterans joined them, offering support and ideas. Marcus felt his old strength returning as they mapped out routes and discussed security measures. These men and women spoke his language: mission objectives, contingency plans, and most importantly, protecting the vulnerable. At the community center, Mrs. Rodriguez connected him with parent groups and local activists. "We need all voices," she insisted, her accent thick with passion. "Black, white, brown. All our children deserve better. Pastor Michael offered the church basement for planning meetings. This isn't just about bullying, he said, placing a steady hand on Marcus's shoulder. It's about healing our community. Each day brought new allies. A local printing shop offered to make flyers at cost. The coffee shop promised free beverages for volunteers. Even some teachers quietly pledged their support, sharing stories of bullying they felt powerless to stop. Amaya watched it all with growing excitement. She sat in on planning meetings after school, doing her homework while adults discussed logistics. Sometimes she'd pipe up with suggestions that made everyone smile, but they listened. "We should have music," she said one evening. "Happy music that makes people want to dance." Marcus smiled at his daughter's wisdom. "That's perfect, baby. This isn't about anger, it's about hope." A week later, Marcus stood in the print shop, looking at the first batch of flyers. Bold letters proclaimed, "March for change. Every child deserves to feel safe." The date was set for 2 weeks away. The next morning, Marcus and Amaya arrived at school early. They walked hand in hand to the main bulletin board, where announcements and lunch menus hung in neat rows. Marcus handed Amaya the first flyer and a pushpin. "Would you like to do the honors?" Amaya's face glowed with pride as she carefully positioned the flyer in the center of the board. The morning sunlight streaming through the hallway windows made the paper shine like a beacon. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "Now, everyone will know." Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of hope spread through his chest. The flyer wasn't just paper and ink, it was a promise. A promise to his daughter, to himself, and to every child who had ever felt alone in their pain. Together, they stood before the bulletin board, father and daughter, soldier and inspiration, ready to face whatever came next. The morning air was crisp and sharp, carrying the first hints of autumn as crowds began gathering in front of Riverside Park. Marcus stood near the entrance, his heart swelling at the sight before him. Dozens of people, no, hundreds streamed in from all directions, carrying handmade signs with messages like "Stop bullying now" and "Love conquers hate." Veterans in their service caps stood shoulder to shoulder with teachers wearing their school colors. Parents pushed strollers decorated with ribbons, while children skipped alongside them holding smaller versions of the protest signs. Marcus caught snippets of excited conversation as more people arrived, their voices mixing with the rustle of fallen leaves. "Look, Daddy," Amaya tugged at his sleeve, pointing toward a familiar face in the crowd. It was Sarah, the little girl he'd protected that day in the park. She wore a pink jacket and held her mother's hand tightly as they approached. Her father carried a sign that read, "Heroes come in all colors." "Mr. Hayes," Sarah's mother said, her eyes bright with emotion, "we wouldn't miss this for anything." She squeezed Marcus's hand. "What you did that day and what you're doing now, it matters." Marcus nodded, fighting back the lump in his throat. He looked down at Amaya, who beamed with pride. She wore her favorite purple sweater and held a small American flag, its colors bright against the morning sky. More familiar faces emerged from the crowd. There was Mrs. Thompson, Amaya's third-grade teacher, leading a group of faculty members. The local pastor who'd helped organize the march stood chatting with Jewish and Muslim religious leaders. Even some of the parents who'd once avoided eye contact at PTA meetings were there, their presence a silent acknowledgement of change. A news van pulled up, and reporters began setting up their cameras. Marcus watched as they interviewed participants, capturing the growing energy of the crowd. This wasn't just his fight anymore, it had become something bigger. "Ready, sweetheart?" Marcus asked Amaya. She nodded enthusiastically, and with practiced ease, he lifted her onto his shoulders. Her small hands gripped his forehead as she settled into place, giggling. The police escort arrived, and Marcus moved to the front of the crowd. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, but for once, the attention didn't make him uncomfortable. This wasn't about him, it was about every child who'd ever felt afraid or unwelcome. "Let's move out," Marcus called, his voice strong and clear. The crowd responded with cheers, and the march began. Their footsteps echoed off downtown buildings as they made their way through the streets. Cars honked in support, and people emerged from shops to watch. The marchers' voices rose in unified chants. Love not hate, make our schools great. Stand together, stop bullying forever. Amaya's voice rang out above the others, her enthusiasm infectious. From his shoulders, she waved her flag with such vigor that Marcus had to steady her with one hand. The morning sun caught the fabric, making the stars and stripes dance in the light. They passed the park where it had all started. Marcus glanced at the playground, remembering that crucial moment weeks ago. The homeless veteran was getting help now. Marcus had made sure of that. Sometimes the worst moments could lead to the best changes. More people joined as they walked. A group of high school students fell in line, their youth and energy adding to the atmosphere. An elderly couple watched from their porch, then slowly made their way down their steps to join the march, holding hands as they walked. The 2-mile route to City Hall felt shorter than expected. Perhaps it was the company, or maybe it was the purpose that drove them forward. Either way, when the grand steps of City Hall came into view, Marcus felt a surge of emotion he hadn't expected. The crowd spread out across the plaza, signs held high. Marcus carefully lifted Amaya from his shoulders and set her down beside him. She immediately grabbed his hand, squeezing it tight. "Look how many people came, Daddy," she whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. The steps of City Hall had been set up with a podium and microphone. Several city council members stood nearby, along with the school superintendent. Marcus hadn't planned to speak. He'd never been one for public speaking, but as he looked at the gathered faces, words began forming in his heart. Taking a deep breath, he walked up the steps, Amaya's hand still firmly in his. The crowd gradually fell silent, waiting. The morning sun warmed his face as he stepped up to the podium, lifting Amaya to stand on a step beside him. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice carrying across the plaza. "A few weeks ago, I stood up to protect a child in danger, but today, we're all standing up to protect every child from a different kind of danger, the kind that leaves invisible scars." The crowd listened intently as Marcus spoke from his heart about love, faith, and the power of community. He talked about his military service, about the importance of fighting for what's right, and about the strength it takes to choose love over hate. "Change doesn't come from one person," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "It comes from all of us, standing together, saying enough. It comes from teaching our children that differences make us stronger, not weaker. It comes from having faith in each other, in our community, and in the power of love to overcome hate." Amaya looked up at her father, her eyes shining with tears and pride. Marcus placed his hand on her shoulder as he delivered his final words. "Let this march be just the beginning. Let it remind us that when we stand together, when we choose love and understanding, there's nothing we can't accomplish." The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound echoing off the buildings around them. Signs waved, and voices joined together in celebration. Marcus felt Amaya's arms wrap around his waist in a tight hug, and he held her close, their hearts beating as one. The morning sun continued to climb in the sky, casting long shadows across the plaza, but the warmth of hope and unity filled every corner of the gathering. The cheers continued, a testament to the power of one community coming together for change. The school gymnasium had been transformed into a makeshift meeting hall, with rows of metal folding chairs facing a long table where the school board members Saturday. The usual echo of bouncing basketballs and squeaking sneakers was replaced by the soft murmur of concerned parents filing in. Marcus Hayes sat in the front row, his daughter, Amaya's small hand, clasped tightly in his. "You okay, sweetheart?" he whispered, noticing how she kept smoothing her yellow dress with her free hand. Amaya nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the board members shuffling papers at their table. "There's so many people here, Daddy." She was right. The gymnasium was packed, with people standing along the walls after all the chairs had been filled. Marcus recognized faces from the march, veterans wearing their service caps, church members who had supported him, and parents who had once looked at him with suspicion but now offered warm smiles. The little girl he'd saved at the park months ago sat with her parents a few rows back. When she caught his eye, she waved enthusiastically. Her mother mouthed a silent, "Thank you." Board President Mrs. Thompson tapped her microphone, the the feedback cutting through the chatter. "I call this emergency session of the school board to order," she announced, her voice carrying across the gymnasium. "We're here to address the proposed changes to our district's anti-bullying policies and cultural sensitivity programs." Marcus felt Amaya squeeze his hand tighter. He'd prepared her for this moment, explaining that change takes time and patience. But looking at her now, he saw the same quiet strength that had pulled him through his darkest moments. The first hour was filled with testimony. Parents shared stories of their children's experiences with bullying. Teachers spoke about feeling ill-equipped to handle racial tensions. Community leaders presented statistics and recommendations. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he stood tall, military bearing evident in his posture. "I'm not here just as a concerned parent," he began, his deep voice steady and clear. "I'm here as a veteran who fought for the ideals this country represents: equality, justice, and the right of every child to feel safe in their school." He gestured to Amaya, who sat up straighter in her chair. "My daughter taught me that sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with love and understanding. We're not here to point fingers or assign blame. We're here to make things better for all our children." Board member Mr. Richards, who had been one of the strongest opponents of change, removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. Mrs. Thompson's usual stern expression had softened. The deliberation that followed seemed to stretch for hours. Amaya leaned against her father's shoulder, her eyes heavy but determined to stay awake. Marcus wrapped his arm around her, remembering nights in the desert when he'd stayed alert despite exhaustion, knowing how much depended on his vigilance. Finally, Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat. "After careful consideration of the evidence presented, and in light of the overwhelming community support, I move that we vote on the proposed changes." The room grew still. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, feel Amaya's quick breathing against his side. "All in favor of implementing the comprehensive anti-bullying measures and cultural sensitivity programs as outlined in the proposal, please raise your hand." Hands went up, one after another. Even Mr. Richards, after a moment's hesitation, raised his. "The motion passes unanimously," Mrs. Thompson announced, her voice breaking slightly. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Amaya jumped up, tears streaming down her face as she threw her arms around Marcus's neck. He lifted her up, holding her close as his own eyes grew wet. "You did it, Daddy," she whispered in his ear. "We did it, baby," he corrected her, his voice thick with emotion. "All of us together." As the meeting adjourned, people began rising from their chairs. Marcus set Amaya down and started making his way toward the exit, but their progress was slow. Everyone wanted to shake his hand, pat his shoulder, or simply say thank you. Mr. Richards approached, looking somewhat uncomfortable but determined. "Mr. Hayes," he said, extending his hand, "I was wrong about you, about a lot of things. I hope you can forgive an old man for being slow to change." Marcus clasped his hand firmly. "There's nothing to forgive, sir. We're all learning together." Outside the school building, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. A crowd had gathered on the steps, and as Marcus and Amaya emerged, they broke into applause. Former skeptics who had once whispered behind his back now stepped forward to shake his hand. Old allies who had stood with him from the beginning embraced him like family. Amaya stayed close to his side, beaming with pride as person after person congratulated them. The little girl from the park darted forward to give her a hug, their giggles mixing with the sound of clapping hands and words of celebration. Standing there on the steps of the school, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since before his military days, a sense of complete victory, not won through force or fear, but through persistence, compassion, and unwavering faith in the power of love to change hearts. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Riverside Elementary's auditorium, casting warm rectangles of light across the polished floor. Marcus Hayes stood in front of the mirror in the teacher's lounge, adjusting his tie for the third time. His fingers brushed against the service medal pinned to his chest, newly polished and gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He'd spent an hour the night before carefully cleaning it, making sure every detail shone. "Mr. Hayes?" Mrs. Rodriguez, Amaya's teacher, poked her head through the doorway. "We're ready for you." Marcus took a deep breath, smoothing his pressed shirt one last time. The familiar weight of the metal against his chest brought back memories of another ceremony, years ago and continents away. But this time was different. This time, his daughter would be watching. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as Marcus walked down the center aisle. Rows of elementary school children sat cross-legged on the floor, many clutching colorful papers and handmade cards. Parents lined the walls, smartphones ready to capture the moment. Near the stage, Amaya sat with her class, practically bouncing with anticipation. Principal Wilson stepped up to the microphone. "Today, we gather to honor someone who has taught us all about courage, perseverance, and the true meaning of community leadership. Mr. Marcus Hayes isn't just a decorated veteran, he's become a guardian of our school's values." The children's faces turned toward Marcus, their eyes wide with admiration. Some pointed at his medal, whispering excitedly to their friends. He caught sight of the little girl from the park incident, now wearing a bright pink dress and waving enthusiastically from her spot on the floor. "First, our third-grade class has prepared something special," Principal Wilson announced. A line of students stood up, each holding a piece of construction paper decorated with glitter and markers. One by one, they read their messages aloud. "Thank you for keeping us safe," read a freckled boy with glasses. "You showed us what being brave means," said a girl with braids. "You make our school better," declared another student, his voice carrying across the quiet auditorium. Marcus felt his throat tighten as the children continued. Each message, though simple, carried the pure sincerity that only children could deliver. Some cards featured crayon drawings of him in various heroic poses, several complete with a cape, which made him smile. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward next. "Mr. Hayes didn't just help us create new anti-bullying programs. He showed us what it means to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. He's volunteered countless hours in our gym, teaching our students about teamwork and respect. But more than that, he's shown us all what real strength looks like. Not just physical strength, but the strength of character." The teachers had assembled a photo montage, projected onto the wall behind the stage. Images flashed by. Marcus working with students in the gym, speaking at the march, helping with the school carnival. Each photo drew soft awes and occasional applause from the audience. Then came the moment that made Marcus's heart swell. Amaya walked to the microphone, her yellow dress matching the sunshine outside. She stood tall, her chin lifted with pride, though he could see her hands trembling slightly as she held her note cards. "My dad isn't just a hero because he saved someone," she began, her voice clear and strong. "He's my hero because he never gives up. When people were mean, he didn't get mean back. When things got hard, he worked harder. He teaches me every day that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right anyway." Tears pricked at Marcus's eyes as Amaya continued. "Sometimes at night, I hear him praying for the people who were mean to us. That's what makes him a real hero. He's not just my dad, he's my hero, my teacher, and the bravest person I know." The auditorium erupted in applause. Marcus opened his arms as Amaya ran to him, wrapping her in a tight hug. He could feel her small frame shaking with emotion, or maybe it was his own trembling that he felt. Students began coming forward, presenting their cards and drawings one by one. Marcus accepted each one with genuine gratitude, taking time to read them and thank each child personally. Some of the younger ones stared in awe at his medal, and he knelt down to let them see it up close. Teachers shared stories of the changes they'd seen in their students since Marcus began volunteering. Parents stepped forward to express their gratitude. Even Mrs. Thompson, who had once been skeptical at PTA meetings, approached with tears in her eyes to thank him. The celebration continued with cake and punch in the cafeteria. Marcus watched as Amaya proudly showed her friends the scrapbook the teachers had made, filled with newspaper clippings and photos documenting their journey over the past months. As the afternoon light began to fade, Father and daughter finally headed home. They walked hand in hand down the familiar streets, now lit by the warm glow of street lamps. Amaya swung their joined hands back and forth, still buzzing with excitement from the day. Marcus carried the stack of cards and drawings carefully under his free arm, each one a testament to the impact of standing up for what was right. His medal caught the light of the street lamps, but it wasn't the military honor that made him feel proud today. It was the knowledge that he'd shown his daughter what it truly meant to be brave. "Dad!" Amaya's voice broke through his thoughts. "Yes, sweetheart, I meant every word I said today." She squeezed his hand tighter. "You really are my hero." Marcus squeezed back, his heart full. Together, they walked on through the evening, their shadows merging into one on the sidewalk, beneath the gentle glow of the streetlights. The community center buzzed with activity as Marcus Hayes arranged chairs in a circle, preparing for the morning's mentorship session. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, warming the worn wooden floor that had seen countless gatherings before. His service medal, now permanently mounted in a small display case on his desk, caught the light and sparkled. "Need help with those chairs, Mr. Hayes?" Tommy, one of the teenage volunteers, called from the doorway. The 15-year-old had been one of the first to join the program 3 weeks ago. "I've got it covered, but thanks for asking," Marcus replied, smiling at the boy's eagerness. It reminded him of his own youth, before the military, before fatherhood, when helping others had been such a simple thing. The room slowly filled with familiar faces. Veterans wearing caps decorated with unit pins settled into chairs alongside teenagers wearing hoodies and uncertain expressions. Marcus had carefully paired each mentor with a youth who shared similar struggles or interests. The connections forming between them already showed promise. "Good morning, everyone," Marcus began, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had served him well in the military. "Before we start today's session, I'd like to share something with you all." He paused, looking around the circle at faces that had become dear to him over the past few weeks. Some bore the weathered lines of combat stress, others the fresh worry of adolescent troubles. All of them were here because they believed in the possibility of change. 3 months ago, I was just another dad watching his daughter at the park, Marcus continued, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. I didn't know then that a single moment would change everything. When that troubled veteran appeared in the playground, I acted on instinct, military training kicking in. But what happened after? That was about choice. The room remained silent, the tension fixed on Marcus's words. Even the usually fidgety teens sat still, sensing the weight of his message. Each of you sitting here has faced moments that tested you. Maybe it was coming home from deployment and feeling lost in your own hometown. Maybe it was dealing with bullies at school or pressure from peers to make bad choices. Those moments can either break us or become the foundation for something stronger. Marcus walked to the window, gazing out at the community garden they'd started together. Vegetables sprouted in neat rows, tended by veterans and youth working side by side. The sight brought a smile to his face. This program, it's not just about mentoring. It's about recognizing that our struggles can prepare us to help others. Every difficult experience you've had, that's not just pain, that's preparation. He turned back to the group, noting how several of the veterans nodded in understanding. They knew about transformation, about finding purpose in pain. The morning session unfolded, with the usual mix of structured activities and open discussion. Marcus watched as a former Marine sergeant helped a teenage girl work through her anger management exercises. Nearby, a retired Air Force nurse shared coping strategies with a boy dealing with anxiety. During the lunch break, Marcus retreated to his office. Photos lined the walls, newspaper clippings about the anti-bullying march, pictures of community events, and his favorite, Amaya's crayon drawing of their family, now proudly displayed in a dollar store frame. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Thompson, the school principal. "The peer support program you suggested is making a real difference. Thank you, Marcus." He smiled, remembering how different things had felt just months ago. The same school that had once seemed indifferent to his concerns now regularly sought his input. The community that had partially turned against him now embraced his vision for change. Later that afternoon, Marcus led a workshop on conflict resolution. The skills he'd learned in the military, staying calm under pressure, reading situations quickly, finding peaceful solutions, translated perfectly to civilian life. He watched with pride as his students practiced de-escalation techniques, their movements becoming more confident with each try. Remember, he told them, strength isn't about dominating others. It's about having the courage to stand up for what's right, and the wisdom to do it with compassion. As the day wound down, Marcus gathered his things, thinking about how naturally this new role fit him. The same discipline that had made him a good soldier now made him an effective mentor. The patience he'd learned as a single father helped him connect with troubled youth. Even his darkest experiences served a purpose, helping him understand others' pain. When Sunday afternoon arrived, Marcus took Amaya to Riverside Park. The same swings where chaos had erupted months ago now swayed gently in the breeze. Children played, while parents chatted on nearby benches. The scene looked ordinary, but to Marcus, it felt like a miracle. "Look, Dad," Amaya pointed to a group of kids from her school playing together, children of different backgrounds, races, and abilities, all laughing and sharing the jungle gym. Marcus watched as one child helped another up after a minor fall. A parent he recognized from the anti-bullying campaign waved from across the playground. Near the water fountain, one of his teenage mentees was teaching younger kids how to make friendship bracelets. The park had transformed, just as he had. The place that had once witnessed fear and prejudice now hosted regular community gatherings. The weekly veterans walking group met here. The youth mentorship program sometimes held outdoor activities in the same space where Marcus had once tackled a troubled soul. Sitting on a bench, Marcus pulled Amaya close. She snuggled against him, content to watch the peaceful scene before them. The afternoon sun painted everything in warm, golden light, and the air filled with the sound of children's laughter. "I like it better this way," Amaya said softly. "Me too, sweetheart," Marcus replied, his heart full as he observed their transformed community. "The battles aren't over, but we're not alone anymore." What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Marcus Hayes, I hand-picked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.